Are they a package? Oh, I hear a door.
Maybe not.
You will need a slip of paper. I know Danny took that file there on the table. You'll need a slip of paper for tonight. So don't worry, no stress.
Thank you. I apologize for my alarm going off. I hold out an alarm.
Oh,
You can come sit by the table, or like sit back there.
It,
You can sit up here. You can sit.
like, if I don't have a slip of paper with notes on it too, it's a bad thing.
Yeah, those are my sticky
Getting
notes.
old and getting busy.
no, we're just like, oh, okay.
It's usually a.
Whoops. Go. Oh, I lost Donna. Back. All right.
She didn't go home.
I sit up there, but I think I'm
We got
Sorry,
lots of me. But you fit wherever you're comfortable.
girl last week. He's scared of.
Joyce, can you grab my Bible for me? I just realized I left it over there.
Shut it up.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. And for those of you who are joining us online, it will be a little quieter tonight because some of our folks are missing who are usually a little more talkative. So we will all have to make up for what is lacking. Not necessarily lacking, but who is quieter. So if we're not quite as rambunctious tonight because the youthful element is missing.
Is he calling us old?
Yeah,
I think he is.
yes.
You are. We were at the co-op in Kindersley, and the lady, Donna, was buying something, and the lady said, well, minus your over 60 discount. And Donna said, well, I'm not over 60. And the lady turned and said, surely your husband is. Yeah.
She did in the
At
drugstore.
the drugstore. And I said, well, no, I'm actually younger than her. And they're like, oh.
They felt like it.
I think it's the color that gives it away.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Every good book or movie or TV show or any good writing contains three key elements to the writing, whether it's a novel or a play or a TV show or whatever it is. It's called BCB. This is from a creative writing class I took. So whether it's whatever it is, and the first B is brevity. That is, you only use the number of words you need. Anything more becomes extra and you talk too much. So you're supposed to write and write and write and then edit down the pages. So brevity is key. And brevity is using the right word for the right circumstance and changing it. And so you got to look at your words and say, nope, you got to say just as much as you need without saying too much. So it's brevity. And then clarity. You have to say what you mean. Be clear. Otherwise, people don't understand what you mean. Whether it's in film, be clear about what's happening. See what? it to be brief as possible. Now, a 4-hour movie can be brief, but a 1,000-page book can be brief, especially if it's a huge subject. Maybe they've condensed much out of it. So brevity doesn't necessarily mean short. It just means the right number of words. I think I gave Danny the 6 books on the fall of the Roman Empire. Well, it's about 6,000 pages, but it is the Roman Empire, so it's, the book actually is quite brief. Brevity, clarity, and then the one we don't often expect is beauty, or what they call the music of language. That is, the words, the images have to grab your attention to be beautiful. So think about if I said to you, that woman was very pretty. That's not brief. That's too many words. If I said she was stunning, that's different, right? If you said he's very strong, you go, okay, that's good. But if you said he's ginormous, so you have to pick the words that contain. And one of the things that we talk about in writing is not using the word very. Very stupid, very smart, very ugly, whatever, because very is not a powerful word. You have to substitute the word. So this idea of the beauty of the language comes into the expression. So as we look at Paul's writings, Paul was a lawyer, Paul was well-versed. What I hope you'll see, besides the great theological truths that are contained therein, is good writing. Romans is well written. Paul uses the number of words he needs, and he's very clear. Part of the purpose of studying the language is to see the clarity. And again, because with Danny, farmers or healthcare workers, or Bonnie, I'm sure could talk about, what is it you did? Stuff. And we might not understand her. So we want clarity of words. And Paul, part of studying the language, Canada SAS pension, that was it, right? Pension administration. There we go. Clarity. And then beauty. And I hope that you will see, as we study this book, as we spend time in the meaning of words and the details of words, that you will see the beauty of the language here in Scripture. And often we miss it. So that's kind of the background to why, in part, we study the depth we do and take the time to study the language, so that we can see, more to the point, we can see the clarity and the beauty of God's Word. But we begin tonight, grab a slip of paper, with a little quiz.
Probably.
Are we supposed to start?
No.
Oh, no.
10 questions. So number your paper 1 to 10. The answers are all 1 or 2 word answers. And one of these questions was specifically designed for Henry and Lena, so I'm not expecting you to get it. I tried to cater the questions to the audience, clarity, that I'm working with. I tried to find a pension question, but I floundered. All right. How many teaspoons in a cup?
Teaspoons?
Teaspoons in a cup.
Okay, I gotta think about this.
I'm gonna cheat off you because I don't know. I don't know.
Okay. Number 2.
Hold on.
Okay, I'll wait.
That's right. Okay.
Okay, how many acres in a quarter?
No. That I don't know.
Acres in a quarter.
That one I know.
There we go. Number 3. How many sides on a hex nut bolt? How many sides on a hex nut bolt?
No cheating over there.
No. What is the standard torque for car wheel lug nuts? The standard torque in foot-pounds. What is the standard torque for car, not truck, because trucks are crazy, car wheel lug nuts, approximately, within 10 pounds. All right, number 5. What is the difference between baking soda and baking powder?
Did you? I don't remember.
What is the difference between baking soda and baking powder? Okay,
What number was that again? Sorry?
number 5. Number 6, what is the difference between H2O and H2? What is the difference between H2O and H2? Number 7. How many shades of color can the human eye see? How many shades of color can the human eye see? I know that some are easy, some are hard. All right. This one's easy. Number 8's easy. How many kilometers in a mile? And number 9, I'm not expecting anyone here to know because this is the one that was for Henry and Lena. What kind of hat does Monkey D. Luffy wear? And again, I'm not expecting anyone but Henry and Lena to know the answer to that question. So just ignore number 9. We will make this out of 9, not 10. What is the difference between these two sentences? Here they are. Here's the two sentences. The first sentence is, and the word was God. That's the first sentence. And the word was God. And the second sentence is, and the word was a God. Second sentence is, the word was a God.
And what are we supposed to write on that?
What's the difference between the two sentences?
Oh.
Between sentence, the word was God, and the word was a God. If you're joining us at home, there's no prizes.
Oh, then I'm gonna throw up.
There's free coffee, buddy. All right, let's see how we did out of 9. How many teaspoons in a cup?
40.
48. Exactly. Thank you, Donna. Close. How many acres in a quarter? Is it 160 or 165? 160. There we go. Okay, 160. How many sides on a hex nut bolt? 6.
Oh.
It's a hex, hexagon, hexagram, hex is 6. What is the standard torque for car wheel lug nuts? 80. 80 is average, but they go up from there. So about 80 is about 8. If you're within 10, 70 to 90, we'll give it to you. What is the difference between baking soda and baking powder?
They allow different things to rise.
Okay, good.
Acidity.
Baking powder distiller.
Good. Baking powder is made of baking soda plus cream of tartar and cornstarch.
What?
Baking powder can be substituted for baking soda by tripling the amount of baking powder.
But there is something about the rising.
Yeah, and that's the cream of tartar, the acidic nature of it.
Okay,
Cream of
great.
tartar is
Yeah.
acidic.
So this baking powder is pure 11 and baking soda is pure 11 and baking powder is distiller.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, one has filler and one doesn't. Yeah.
Okay, I guess I can have that one.
All right. What is the difference between H2O and H2?
One's a liquid and
One's water.
One's water, and what's the other one?
Yeah.
Yeah, hydrogen. Yeah. H2O is 2 hydrogen molecules and 1 oxygen molecule. Hydrogen is 2 hydrogen molecules without the oxygen model. You take oxygen out of water and you get hydrogen. So it's just that 1 oxygen model.
If I just said oxygen, is that kind
Oxygen is the answer, yes.
Okay.
The O is the answer. How many shades of color do they estimate the human eye can see? Just over 1 million.
Whoa.
They estimate the human eye can
Oh, that's
see
a little
over
short.
1 million colors. So the follow-up question is, how many shades of green are there? There's 3. Light green, dark green, and British racing green. That's the only 3 shades of green there are. But there are apparently hundreds of thousands of shades of green. And Christina was saying that shrimp can see more shades of color than we can.
How do they know that?
Yeah, how do they know
How,
that?
like, I know.
They've talked to
Can
him.
they talk to?
Yeah.
Okay.
The shrimp whisperer.
How many kilometers in a mile?
Kilometers in a mile.
Yes, 1.6.
1.6. Oh, I had that the first time.
1.6. Because you times it by 6.
1.2 count?
Sure, close enough. You might want to do your mileage that way, but that's good. And what kind of hat does Monkey L. Huffy wear? Straw, but that's neither here nor there. All right, what's the difference between the 2 sentences? The word was God and the word was a God.
Singular, plural.
And what difference does that make? If we say the word was a God or the word was God?
There's only one God.
That's right. Because if we say Jesus was, in the beginning was the word was with God, and the word was a God, what does that mean?
There's only one, yeah, then you're saying it's only one.
There's several.
There's several. He could be one of many. So in the first question we have, What would be the difference if Donna said there's 48 teaspoons in a cup and Bonnie said there's 52 and Harlan said there's 9? What difference would that make in baking?
Well, you wouldn't bake very well.
No.
Your product wouldn't be good.
Every product would be different, right?
Somebody could get sick.
Somebody could- yeah, exactly. Or the food would taste terrible. If that number is specific for a reason so that we can follow the recipe. So we have to agree on a very specific term. 48, not 47, not 49. It's got to be 48. All right. What difference is if there's 160 acres in a quarter or 165?
Someone else.
Profit and how much you get, you sell the land for.
Exactly.
Meet your neighbor's full fire.
No.
That's right. Yeah, we have to, for the sake of buying and selling and marketing and growing, that number becomes crucial. It can't be 64 or 60 or 59. Okay, standard torque wrench. Well, if we change the number, wheel lug nuts break off or fall off, right? They're designed to a specific number. And we can go through each one. H2O, and if you take one oxygen molecule away, you don't have water anymore. You think how small an oxygen molecule is. If you remove that one tiny molecule, you end up with a highly flammable gas called hydrogen. You know, or if you want hydrogen and you add oxygen, then it doesn't burn at all and you end up with water. It's amazing that one little molecule goes from a drinkable liquid that sustains all life on the planet to a highly dangerous liquid that would kill all life on the planet. If we breathed hydrogen, we would all die. Well, I guess you can't breathe water either, but if you started drinking hydrogen, you'd die. I hope you're seeing the point here. Shades of color, I don't think that's important, again, with mileage, and the crucial nature of awe. In other words, details are important. All right, with that in mind, Dan, if you would hand those out. The awe can change everything. Now, I started with this as an introduction for a reason, because there's a possibility, I won't say danger, but there's a possibility that we can, in studying, like, why are we studying these words? Why not just kind of get a big picture and go on our way? Because the words, the little letters, can change everything. If we take out that one I in the text, we end up with a cult. We end up with Jesus not being God. So we do study words. And as we go through Romans, and again, we're only going to study 15 words tonight. And you may say, oh, let's just get on with the big picture. We will make great strides. But I think it's important that we look at some of the details. I got this right here. In 1925, 1926, German art historian Aby Warburg was teaching a seminar at the University of Hamburg. And one of the titles of one of the lectures was God is in the details. What does that phrase mean? God is in the details. Think about it. He's an architect.
Certain laws that you have to, the laws of nature, you have to keep in order to have something work out.
Okay, so you got to follow certain rules. But think about an architect who's designing a room or a house and says, God is in the details. What's he mean by that?
Make it perfect.
Make it perfect, right? The beauty of it.
I was gonna say the beauty.
Excellent. That's the theme. The beauty of architecture is often found. You think about a house, you go, I love the details. You know, the sconce work. I love the detail, and the details are what make the house unique. So you think about a craftsman house versus mid-century modern. It's the detail. There are 4 walls and windows and doors, right? But it's the details that separate the two that make the one a different kind of beauty than the other. So many of you would love a good craftsman. Others think, well, that's not my favorite. I love, say, mid-century modern or whatever. And so Warburg said that God is in the details. The beauty of something is found in the details. Well, about 40 years later, in 1963, they changed the phrase to say, the devil's in the details. Now, what does that mean?
Some fall apart.
Yeah, some fall apart. That is, when we say the devil's in the details, we mean that something may seem simple, but the details are complicated and causes problems. So when you're working on a piece of machinery and it's that one screw, you're going, oh, the devil's in the details. because that's what's causing you the problems.
Hmm.
That's the opposite exactly of what Warburg meant. Warburg meant that beauty is found in the detail. And we've said, no, the devil's the details. It's the details that divide us that cause all the problems. So as we study scripture, the question is the devil in the details or is God in the details? Well, I think you already know where my line of the argument is, right? I think God is in the details. I think the beauty and much of the, not much, a portion of the significance is found in the details. So as we study scripture, we look for the details. We study it thoroughly, the details are important, or the details are complicated and causes problems, and maybe a little bit of both. All right, with that in mind, as a preface, turn to Romans chapter 1. We're looking at 9 verses tonight. Chapter 1, verses 8 through 17. Again, if you don't want to read, just give me the look. Without my glasses, I can see you. Donna, could you read verse 8?
First, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for you all, because your faith is being proclaimed throughout the whole world.
Good. What is the very first phrase, Donna?
I thank my God.
Good. And he says, how does Paul begin his letter? I thank God. So what's the tone for this entire letter going to be?
Thank you.
Thankfulness. Paul is grateful for the church in Rome, whom he has never met. So Paul is thanking, and what's he doing? He's praying for them, right? I thank my God. What's the rest of the verse, Donna?
Through Jesus Christ for you all, because your faith is being proclaimed throughout the whole world.
Good. And what's he thankful for? Their faith. That's going to strike a chord, because the theme of Romans is the just shall live by faith. So the first thing Paul says, I thank God that you are people of faith. He's already picking, oops, I lost my thing here, the economy of words. He's picking a very specific word. He could say, I thank my God for the love you share. That would be true. I thank my God for the generosity you share. That would be true also. But Paul is laying the groundwork for the entire book with one word. I thank God that you are faithful. Now, speaking of faithful, he's going to jump on that right away. So he's choosing words very early to begin to lay the groundwork of everything he's about to say. And that's why you go, why would he choose that word? Because faithfulness and faith are the central message of the book. And he begins by praising and encouraging them. All right, Shelley, 9 and just the first phrase in verse 10.
God, whom I serve with my whole heart in preaching the gospel of his Son, is writing how constantly, it is my witness, how constantly I remember you in my prayers at all times.
Good. So what does he next say to the people in Rome?
God.
What's that?
Yeah,
I keep in my thoughts. I keep praying for you. He wants them to know that he cares for them. So he's ingratiating himself, not in a false sense. He's not, we say, kind of pretending or buttering them up. He says, I love you and I pray for you and I want you to know that you're always in my prayers. As much as this is a theological book, it's also a pastoral book. Because it begins with a pastoral call. You are people of faith and I pray for you. Sometimes we think of Paul as this great theologian. No, he is a praying pastor who prays for his people at every opportunity he has for them. All right, then, tail end of 10 all the way to 12. Harlan, take it away. Chapter 1.
Starting at 10.
Yes.
One of the things I keep on praying is for opportunity. God willing to come at last to see you, and if possible, that it will be a safe trip. For I long to visit you, so I can impart to you the faith that you will help your church grow strong in the Lord. Then too, I need your help, for I want not only to share my faith with you, but to encouraged by yours. Each of us will be blessed to each other.
Good. So what's Paul's prayer? He says, I want to see you. Yeah, I want to come see you. And why?
that he could.
Yeah, so we can mutual encouragement. Here's Paul, the great prophet of the faith, right? Saying, I want to encourage you, and I really hope to be encouraged by you. There's a humility in Paul's heart. And again, this is the pastoral side of Paul. He says, I want to come see you. He gives 3 reasons why he wants to. He says, first, I long to see you. What does the word long convey? or Carrie? What's the emotional tone there?
Yearning to see.
Yearning, yeah. It's not, I must come see you. I have to argue with you. He says, I ache. I hunger to see you. So again, we're seeing the heart language of Paul early in the book. So he says, I want to come because I want to come see you, which is fair. I long to see you. Then he says that I may impart some spiritual gift for you. And this idea of blessing. Paul saw that he had carried the blessing of God and he wants to bless them. And in turn, that they would bless him. And then he uses the word. Harlan's translation didn't use the word, but he says that you may be established. Does anybody have that in their translation?
Yep.
Yeah, that you may be established. That word has kind of three meanings. It can mean to build, to establish something, like we think about establishing a business. But it also can convey the idea of strengthening. So you're weak, you need to be strengthened. And it can contain the idea of firming up your decision, helping them shore up. So it contains that range of understanding. Paul says, I want to strengthen your faith. I want to make sure that your faith is well established, well built, and I want to make sure that the decisions you've made for Jesus are firm. But they all contain the same idea, don't they? You think about making something firm, establishing. He wants to make sure that they are strong, not yielding, not shifting, that they're firm. The wise man built his house upon the rock. This is what Paul wants to make sure. All right, so that's his desire. He says, I want you to be encouraged. And then we pick it up in verse 12. Again, we just read that. The purpose that we may be encouraged together. And then he says, and here's why I haven't been able to come see you yet. Joyce, verses 13 and 14.
I do not want you to be unaware, brothers, that I planned many times to come to you, but have been prevented from doing so until now, in order that I might have a harvest among you, just as I have had among the other Gentiles. I am obligated both to Greeks and non-Greeks, both to the wise and the foolish.
Good. So he says, I want to come see you. And what might they be saying? Yeah. How come you haven't? That's nice to say that, but you haven't come to see us. Why haven't you been here? Paul says, I have wanted to. I really did. I planned many times, but I was prevented. He's not, passing the buck or laying blame. He just says, I've been trying, but life hasn't worked out. So he wants to give them a gift of fruit. Why? He gives three reasons why he wants to visit. So I may obtain some fruit among you. They would grow, even as they're among the rest of the Gentiles. He wants to give them the gift. And then his second reason, he says, because I'm under obligation. Paul felt a deep and abiding sense of duty to proclaim the gospel to everyone, to the Greeks, and I like that, Greeks and barbarians, both the wise and foolish. Within the Roman Empire, there were really only kind of two kinds of people. There were the good people and everybody else. The good people were the Roman citizens who lived within the empire. They all shaved. They were good people. They paid their taxes and they were nice. They were obedient goods. And everybody else outside the gates were barbarians. Barbarians didn't shave. They were horrible. They were just barbarians, right? And what we see later on in Roman history is the barbarian invasion. The barbarians started to come and they wanted to be Romans. It got all very confusing. But he says, I'll preach the gospel to who? You, the Romans, and then who's next? The Greeks? They're so, but ultimately to wise and the foolish, the barbarian, anybody who wants those unwashed, unshaved Germans, is actually he's talking about the barbarians to the north, the English and the Germans and the Celts and the French, all these people who didn't deserve, civilization. Paul says, I want, and ultimately Paul goes to Spain, which is Europe, to preach the gospel to the barbarians. And so he uses this term that he longs to go because he is obligated. All right, so we've established who he is. We've seen it already in the early part, why he hasn't come, what he hopes to accomplish, and then he gets to the heart of the message. We know who Paul is, that he's a pastor because he prays. And he is also humble because he says, you can bless me just as I have blessed you. He's today we would say he's open-minded, but I think he speaks of Paul's humility and Paul's hunger to continue to grow in grace and knowledge of our Savior. And then verse 15, Danny.
That is why I'm so eager to preach the gospel also to you who are at Rome.
So he says, this is why, because I'm under obligation, because I love you, because I want to impart some gift. He says, and here's the purpose of his visit. Why does Paul want to visit? I'm eager to Preach the gospel. This is Paul's purpose. This then, that sentence, you who are of faith, I who proclaim the gospel, will now lay the foundation of the rest of the book, all the way to the end. It's about the gospel. And herein lies the basic outline for the rest of the book. That little phrase, I am eager to preach the gospel to you who are in Rome, will tell us what the letter's about. It will tell us what the gospel is. It'll tell us about our relationship to the gospel, how we respond to the gospel, how the gospel is lived all out. And now we get verses 16 and 17, which is Paul's 15-word explanation of the gospel. And this is where we're going to start taking the petals off the leaves. Because these 15 words, this is where God is in the detail. These 15 words will give us the gospel. The gospel is 15 words. Actually, the gospel is one word, Jesus. But we could expand it to 15 words because Paul's a preacher, so he has to use 15 where one might have been enough. But still, very brief, 15 words. All right. Bonnie Meyer, you want to read 16 and 17?
For I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek. For in it the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith, as it is written, but the righteous man shall live by faith.
That's Paul's proclamation of the good news of Jesus. Really, it's expressed in three primary ideas. He starts with this idea, for I am not ashamed of the gospel. He defines his personal relationship to the gospel, and then he says, for it is, and then he unpacks what the gospel is, and then he says, for the gospel, the righteousness of God is. So he says, I am, the gospel is, the righteousness of God is, or how the gospel is revealed. Here's who I am, here's what the gospel is, and here's how the gospel is to be received. Make sense?
Mhm.
Here's who I am and my relationship to the gospel. Here's what the gospel is, and here's how the gospel is encountered or received. So it's kind of a sandwich of ideas. Here's my relationship to the gospel. Here's your relationship to the gospel, where what we'll encounter, and here's what it is. Make sense? So it's a sandwich of three ideas, because good things come in threes. There's a great deal of study in public speaking and everything on power of three. You never give more than three ideas. We know through vast study that if you say four ideas, people will probably forget the fourth. They'll actually start to tune out after the fourth. And again, I should have my blackboard behind me. Brevity, right? Three ideas. Think of the threes that you know off by heart. What are three ideas in a row that you could say instantly? Faith, hope, and love. Good. What are another three? Yesterday, today, tomorrow. Any other threes that come to mind? Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Good. Any other three? Man and a woman had a little baby that makes three. Sorry, the song called Three is a Magic Number.
Faith, hope, and charity.
Faith, hope, and charity. Yep. Husband, wife, and child. What else? Any other threes? Earth, sea, and sky.
Yeah.
I'll keep pressing you tonight. What's that? Three sets of three? Yeah,
Oh,
three sets
yeah.
of three. Yeah.
What? It's easy to remember.
Yeah, because it's in threes.
7-digit numbers.
What's your phone number? 306-633. You know, the first two are easy to remember.
Yes, right.
And the last four, like, what was the fourth one again? 6342 or whatever. What's your house address? No, I don't know if it's three numbers or not, but he might be in house number 2 for all I know.
In the country.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is three in the.
Well, you have Southwest 14.7 or something.
Yep.
Yeah.
It is
Yeah,
three.
series of threes, yeah.
Yeah.
Our brains are, for some reason, we are conditioned to think in threes. And we memorize in threes very quickly. That's why you have, what's your name? Donald Ray Trelwine. Then you meet Riley William Frederick Henry Craig. You go, that's too many names in one person. There's a little boy, our neighbor was, the first time he introduced himself, he was Riley William Frederick Craig. That's a lot of names, boy. That usually it's just three. All right, we are, and that's one of the teaching tools that Paul will use time and again. He will do everything in threes. So the gospel, he says, is my relationship to what it is and your relationship to it. But we're going to break it down because it's actually 15, which is divisible by, because 5 and 1 is 6, and 6 is divisible by 3. Everything comes down to 3s. All right, here is the gospel. The power of God for salvation. How do you respond? And so begins the longest and most detailed look, the rest of this book, at what is the gospel. But let's take a look at 15 statements about the gospel. Someone that said this of the gospel. The gospel is the chariot wherein the Spirit rides victoriously when he makes his entrance into the hearts of men. I love that image. Now, there's a beautiful image. The gospel is the chariot that carries the truth into our lives. All right. First word, Paul says, for I'm not ashamed. All right. What does that word mean? Ashamed. What comes to mind? What images, thoughts? When someone says, I'm ashamed.
Hiding or cowering.
What's that, Bonnie?
Cowering or hiding.
Cowering or hiding. Yes. What else do you think of when you think of shame?
Don't want others to know.
You don't want others to know, Sylvia? Feeling badly. Yeah, strong emotional content. You don't feel necessarily guilty. Ashamed is rooted in the idea of nakedness. When Adam and Eve were in the garden, they saw they were naked and they were ashamed. Ashamed is about identity, who I am. It's often been said, guilt is feeling bad for what you do. Shame is feeling bad for who you are. Is that fair, Shelley? That this whole idea of shame is the revelation of something that makes you feel extremely uncomfortable. I don't want to dwell too long there. The definition of shame is to experience a painful feeling or a sense of loss of status because of a certain activity. It describes your conscious guilt or exposure or the fear of embarrassment, of being exposed to be wrong or false, being afraid, feeling shame, which prevents us from doing something, a reluctance to say or do something for fear of humiliation. Go to 1 Corinthians 1:23. Paul says, for the gospel, look up 1 Corinthians 1:23. I got lost in my next thought.
But we preach Christ crucified, to Jews a stumbling block, and to Gentiles foolishness.
So the gospel was not well received. The Jews saw the death of Christ on the cross as a stumbling block. Cursed is he who hangs on the tree. The Gentiles, the Greeks, saw as foolishness. It's not logical that the God would be that way. And the gospel was ridiculed. In your notes there, if you look on this page with this little drawing, and if you're watching online, I'm just going to delete myself so you can see the drawing. You should still be able to hear me, no problem. All right, this is an excavation in ancient Rome. Archaeologists discovered this picture of a slave bowing down before a cross with a donkey hanging on. So you can see the rough etchings in the gray, and then just through relief, the actual drawing there. And the caption that you can't read in all those garbled letters says this: Alexmenos worships his God. So how did the Romans view Christianity?
Foolish.
Foolish. Yeah, you may as well worship a donkey on the cross as a man on the cross. The idea of worshiping something on the cross was seen as stupid, unwise. And we actually see early forms of ridicule. Christianity was ridiculed in Rome as being the stupidest thing. This guy's just making fun of him, really. Isn't that funny, eh?
Is this this little guy's name, Alex?
Yes, you can kind of see a couple of letters there. There's an A and then an N-O-S. That's
Sure.
his name, Alexamenos.
Okay.
And then there's that looks like Semeti, that's worship. And then Eon, that's part of X. And there's an X, his God. So it's actually Alexis worships God his. But yeah, very good eye, Donna. So they're making fun of him. And Paul says, I'm not afraid. I'm not ashamed of the gospel. So he begins by his relation to the gospel. Unlike many in Rome who were ashamed of or thinking Christianity was stupid, Paul says, not me. I feel no shame, no fear, no sense of being, socially outcast. Paul is fiercely on the side of the gospel. Bob Moorhead writes, this is a little long, but this is his article on shame. I am part of the fellowship of the unashamed. I have Holy Spirit power. The die has been cast. I've stepped over the line. The decision has been made. I am a disciple of Jesus Christ. I won't look back, look up, slow down, back away, or be still. My past is redeemed. My present makes sense, and my future is secure. Free, right? Good public speaker. I'm finished and done with low living, sight walking, small planning, smooth knees, colorless dreams, tame visions, mundane talking, chintzy giving, and dwarf goals. That's called the beauty of language. I no longer need preeminence, prosperity, position, promotions, plaudits, or popularity. I don't have to be right, first, tops, recognized, praised, regarded, or rewarded. I now live by presence, learn by faith, love by patience, live by prayer, and labor by power. My pace is set, my gait is fast, my goal is heaven, my road is narrow, my way is rough, my companions few, my guide is reliable, my mission is clear. I cannot be bought, compromised, deterred, lured away, turned back, deluded, or delayed. I'm not giving this justice. I will not flinch in the face of sacrifice, hesitate in the presence of adversity, negotiate at the table of my enemies, ponder at the pool of popularity, or meander in the maze of mediocrity. I won't give up, back up, let up, or shut up until I've preached up, prayed up, paid up, stored up, and stayed up for the cause of Christ. I'm a disciple of Jesus Christ. I must go until he returns, give until I drop, preach until all I know, preach until all know, work until he comes. And when he comes to get his own, I will have no problem. He will have no problem recognizing me. My colors will be clear. I am not ashamed of the gospel, because it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes.
Wow.
I'm not sure who he is. I just found it today, but I love this thing. That,
It's intense.
yeah, you got to be standing when you say that. There's going to be more power behind that. But that's the whole idea. I am not ashamed. I am committed to this. It should send chills down our sides when we hear things like that, right? And it does. It tingles when I read it. Paul says, now notice, Paul said in one sentence, I am not ashamed of the gospel. He took how many words? Yes, Paul was the master of brevity, but perhaps Bob was the master of beauty.
I looked him up.
Oh, yeah.
He was the pastor of Overlake Christian Church in Redmond, Washington for 30 years.
Oh, there we go.
He's passed away since.
That's worth printing on a card and putting on top of your fridge. So, all right.
Yeah.
We're 1 out of 15. We're doing great. How are we doing for time? Okay, good. I am not ashamed of the gospel. Why? The second phrase. For it, that is the gospel, is the power. He stops there. The gospel is power. How did Rome view the gospel? Remember the picture we just saw? Foolishness, weakness. To the Jews, humiliation. To the Greeks, foolishness. Paul says, no, the gospel is the opposite. It is not a sign of weakness. The gospel itself is. Now, Paul's weak. Paul will confess that. We as Christians are weak, but the gospel itself is power. Jeremiah 23:29 said, this is God speaking, is not my word like fire? I wish Dylan was here.
Yeah.
And like a hammer that shatters a rock. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but the word will always shatter you. I got some kind of version there of that. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 1:18, for the word of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. The word here is dunamis. It means ability or capability, but it's a very specific kind of ability or capability. For dunamis is the power to overcome resistance. It's not simply power of an abstract kind, just as if the gospel was power, but it is Paul says, for the gospel has the power to overcome resistance. What machinery has the power to overcome resistance? What resists? Curious. Give you a second to think about that. Resistance of the air. Good. Engine overcomes resistance of friction.
Like a plow.
A plow overcomes resistance of hard soil. Now we're getting there, right? You think about the hammer that overcomes the resistance of the rock, but the images of the plow overcome the resistance of the soil. The soil doesn't want to be opened up, right? It doesn't want to receive the seed. So the gospel is the means by which that which is resistant is opened and the seed can be planted. I love this image. The gospel is the power of God. It is able to overcome. And what resists the gospel in human terms? Our hearts, our experiences, our mind, all kinds of things resist the gospel, right? Because the gospel seems like foolishness. So how do you say to someone, I've got a really foolish idea I want to share with you? You say, I'd rather not listen to you. That's a foolish idea. I'm resistant to foolish ideas. And I hope you are too. When somebody tries to sell you something or tell you something, you have a natural resistance to foolishness. So that foolishness has to be overcome. So somebody says to you, would you like to zip line across the Grand Canyon? And you go, that's a really dumb idea. They'll say, yeah, but you'll enjoy it. It'll be exciting. They try and pitch you. Some of you might be resistant to give away your money or to get rid of your money. So what does advertising do? It wants to overcome that resistance. I want to keep my money. You go, well, you should buy this shampoo, because it's special. And so we understand that humans have a natural resistance to foolish and unwise or risky or non-profitable ventures. And so marketing and all that stuff works its way to overcome that resistance through color and smell and objects, if you're, whatever. Well, the gospel is overcoming the resistance of the human heart because the people see the gospel as foolishness or as untruth in the case of the Jews who don't, cursed is he who hangs on a tree. So Paul says the gospel, I'm not ashamed because it overcomes the resistance of the human heart and mind. And he says it's the power of who? Of God. That's the third key. Is the gospel our power? No. Do we come with, convincing words and beautiful music? No, the power of the gospel is rooted and it comes from God, not from us. Now, we can be the agents of that. We can be the vessels for it. Paul calls himself a slave, that we come bringing the gospel like servants, but we recognize that the power of the gospel, it is of God. Salvation does not come from us. We cannot save ourselves. It must, by no works of flesh can we boast. That's the third. Fourth, he says, for salvation. All right, what does that word mean to you?
Save.
Save, yeah. Common word, we might not use it, but we use the word saved. So what do you try and save?
Money.
What's that?
Money.
Money, sure, we try and save money. Yeah.
Life.
Life, yeah. Working in healthcare, we try and save life. What else do we try and save? Time. Yeah, we're more efficient, so we can save time to be used elsewhere. Good. Just like we save money to be used elsewhere, we save our health to be used elsewhere. Yeah, for benefit, right? We might save face. We might save our hair color. No, there's all kinds of things we might save. Well, this is a very common word. It means to rescue or to deliver. This idea of deliverance from danger, destruction, or peril. So, what does the lifeguard do? Saves the drowning, right? So he's not talking about saving money as in holding on to our lives, but the concept of being rescued. So we might think of being saved as kind of holding on to it. That's not the image here. The image is to be delivered or rescued from destruction or peril. It is the restoration to a place of safety, soundness, or health. You can save someone's health, taking them from sickness to health, from weakness to strength. This idea of being preserved from any danger or destruction. So salvation contains two ideas within it. There's a negative side, because if we're saved, what does that mean? That we're lost, right? Someone who's not lost doesn't need to be saved. If someone's walking down the street, walking their dog, you don't walk up and say, can I help you? I'll get you home. They're going, I'm not lost. I just live. They don't need saving. But if you see someone, whose car's in the ditch, they're a long way from home, right? So salvation by its nature implies helping, that they're lost, that humanity is lost in and of themselves. So salvation has a negative aspect, stating that, only those who are lost need saving. Only those who are, unclean need bathing. Then it implies the positive side, that salvation is possible. All right, fifth, he says to everyone. Who is the gospel for?
Everyone.
No exception whatsoever. The gospel, I love this phrase, the gospel is universal, but participation is limited.
Oh.
It's available to anyone. It's like a free day at the pool. I am not going. Not my thing, right? The participation is limited, but opportunity is available to all. The gospel is available to anybody. Participation does not come, and that's where Paul's going to talk about how we participate in the gospel and who gets to participate. Well, he says in the very next phrase. So who participates in the gospel? Everyone who
Believes.
How do we participate in the gospel?
Believing.
By believing. It's so beautifully simple. The means adherence or this commitment, this faith is all about trusting in Jesus. And the phrase here literally means continually making a volitional choice to believe. This is not something you did when you were 6, although you may well have done it. That was the beginning of the journey. It is this idea of continually being saved, continually. We believe every day. So we may have days of doubt. We may have days of disbelief. We saw that on Sunday. Some waver and worship at the same time. It doesn't mean that we stop, but that we will always keep believing. Just keep on. So I like this. It's this present tense, this willing choice of believing. And he gives us 4 elements of believing, not contained here, but in the book. Belief is a mental assent. It is a conviction, and it's personal surrender, and then it's conduct. So we agree with our minds, we agree with our wills, we agree with our emotions, that is conviction, and then we continually live in that mind, emotion, and will, right? There's another trinity for you there. All right, well, who did the gospel go to first? Now, Paul proposes a little history. Number 7, to the Jew first. He acknowledges the history. The gospel is a historical fact. It is rooted in this. This is not some Johnny-come-lately idea Paul's introducing. Like, oh yeah, Paul, he came up with something while he was in the desert. You know, he was. There was an oracle at a place called Delphi, the Oracle of Delphi, and we see this in Acts later on, where there was a girl who had a spirit, and she was part of the Oracle of Delphi. And what it was it was built over a geyser below a volcano. So these noxious fumes came up. Alexander the Great visited the Oracle of Delphi before he went and conquered the world. So these women would be down in the subterranean caverns where the oracles were, and they would breathe in the vapors. And then they would go, well, as you can imagine, they would have these seizures, and the men would interpret the seizures. So these girls would be breathing in these noxious fumes. So what happens if you breathe in noxious fumes? You start going a little crazy, right? And they would babble, and they would all this stuff, right? And then the men would say, "Oh, what she means by that?" You know, she's doing this, right? It was these ideas that were coming out of nowhere. Paul says, no. The gospel is not the Oracle of Delphi. I didn't breathe smoke while I was in the wilderness, you know. Today that has a different meaning. He says it was rooted, and he appeals all the way back to the creation account, to the Jews first. From biblical perspective, all humanity, but it begins in order of sequence. The gospel first came to the Jews, for Christ came from Israel. Right? He says, and then to the Greeks, and then everybody else. So the Greeks are synonymous with everybody else. So, because in Jewish, you were either Jewish or you were a Gentile. The Romans, you were either a Roman or a barbarian. You know, we might say today you're either for us or against us, or I'm not sure how you want to divide your culture or your communities, but they divided. They had very clear lines of division. So that's 8, the Greeks. For the 9th declaration of the gospel, for in it. Why not by it? Why not through it? Why in?
The sense of being totally immersed and surrounded.
For the gospel, in the gospel, it's contained in this almost like amber, this beautiful image, right? So what's in the gospel? Well, he's about to proclaim. The gospel isn't the carrier. The gospel is it's like I was thinking about today on the way home. You can be underwhelmed, but you can also be whelmed. The word whelmed just means the water's just above your head. But if you're overwhelmed, you're actually, so if you're underwhelmed, you're here. If you're whelmed, you're here. And if you're overwhelmed, you're here. So you can be whelmed. Just, how's your day going? Oh, I'm whelmed. You know? I'm not underwhelmed. I'm not overwhelmed. I'm just holding my own. I'm neutrally buoyant. You know. So ask Doug how he's doing. I'm just whelmed. You know?
Is it not kind of also the idea of acting?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very active idea. Yeah. There's energy here. And he's going to grab that word and talk about Zoe a little later on. Very good point. Excellent. All right. The gospel is the vessel of grace. The 10th one, the God, for in it, the righteousness of God. And that the root word here is straightness. God is straight, narrow. There is no deviation, that it conforms to the authoritative standard or norm. And that idea, righteousness is a moral concept. God's character is the source. He is straight. He is moral in all he does. And God is totally righteous because he is totally as he should be. The idea of righteousness or unrighteousness is outside the norm, or outside the line of deviation, or the line of correctness. So I want you to think about a tire. A tire is all these cords, those radials there. And it has to be flat and straight, right? If you have a bubble in the tire, it's out of round. And then what happens? Right. You're going, well, this tire is not righteous, is what you're saying. This is an unrighteous tire. It is out of round. And righteousness is the idea of conformity to the design or the intention. And this moral certainty. So God has a moral line that he walks. We see that in the Ten Commandments. Somebody said, if you want to know what's wrong with your life, sit down with the Ten Commandments. You'll figure it out, you know. There's a moral line, the 613 laws, but if we stay with the 10 Commandments, it's like 10 lines in a field that we walk down. And the idea of God's righteousness is this path of straightness. And anything that deviates from that we call perversion, right? It's a twisting of that. And so the righteousness of God is the way to be right with God. It's the right way of walking. Humans, and he's going to, about the next section we're going to look at, he's going to show all the deviations and all the perversions. He says, for the gospel is good news, for in it, first off, what does the gospel reveal to us? Well, think about what is the first work of the Spirit? To convict men of sin, righteousness, and godliness, right? The first work of the gospel is to show us that we need salvation. The first work of the gospel is to show us the standard of God and how we've deviated from the standard. And we need that because in our society, we don't have as many standards as we used to. There's very little deviation anymore, right? The idea of postmodernism and all that is that there are no standards. Anything goes in a sense, right? But we still have certain standards in our society. And so we say the law of Canada is the standard. And any deviation from the law puts you outside. And so the law convicts you of the right path. He says, well, the gospel is bad news to start with. Just as he said before, the gospel speaks of, the negative side. The gospel is showing us the righteousness of God. And in doing so, what does it reveal about us? Our unrighteousness. Exactly, Joyce. Yeah. Once we see the standard, we know so if I was to take up piano tomorrow and I went to an adjudicator and did my thing, what would the adjudicator say? Keep working on it. If they were kind, they would say, keep working on it. If they weren't, they say, don't quit your day job. Right? There's this adjudicating line. And that's what the gospel does. And that's a healthy thing because it shows what is beautiful. God's standard is the standard of beauty. Anything that deviates from beauty, and we see that in art and film and music, it's not beautiful. It's moved away from the standard of beauty. And that's why beauty is so central, because beauty becomes one of the hallmarks of truth. Truth is beauty, so beauty is truth. It's a little more poetic than that. But they say, okay, so the righteousness of God is revealed. All right. And the phrase there is being continually revealed. God's righteous wrath is continually being revealed against unrighteousness. Does nature reveal the righteousness of God? Think about the verses yet to come. Nature reveals the glory of God, the power of God, his strength. And Paul's going to say that in the verses to come. He's going to unpack all this in the verses to come. Nature doesn't reveal the righteousness of God. Nature reveals beauty, creation, power, glory, wonder, all these things. But it cannot reveal righteousness. Because in nature, there's many ways to do the same thing. How many ways are there to consume energy within nature? You can eat. That's one way of doing it, right? If you're a tree, what do? You grow. How do you get your energy, though?
Oh.
Photosynthesis, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
So in nature, there's all kinds of ways to get energy. Nature doesn't have a standard of behavior, right? Nature is very full of variety. Nature doesn't say you need 4 legs. Sometimes you need 8. Sometimes you need 2. Sometimes you can get away with wings and 6 other ones. I don't know. Or a millipede with 100. So I guess what I'm saying is nature is not the revelation of righteousness. So the gospel is a revealed doctrine. It is not a natural doctrine. We will not come to the gospel on our own by sitting and staring at the stars. We will come to wonder and beauty. We will come to the awareness there's something greater than us, but we will not come to understand the righteous standards of God. That's what the gospel's for. That's why it's revealed. It is being continually revealed. Neither nature nor law revealed the gospel. The law revealed what? God's judgment. It didn't reveal God's grace. It revealed the standard. So the gospel came along and had greater power than both nature and the law, for it revealed the grace of God in the face of unrighteousness. Almost done. 12, from faith to faith. Interesting. This phrase has been understood in a variety of ways. There's kind of 4 key ways. It can mean from the faith of the Old Testament to the faith of the New Testament, which is fair. The faith of Abraham and Moses, which they had faith. Abraham was justified by faith. To the faith of the New. Could be that. It can be from the faith of Paul, the preacher, to the faith of the hearers. The gospel is revealed from my faith as the preacher to your faith as the hearer. It can be revealed from faith to faith, from God's faithfulness to our faith in God's faithfulness. Or it can be from the young faith that you have to mature faith. You know, the gospel takes you on a journey from immaturity and early days to greater maturity to where many of you are here tonight. The words are literally out of faith into faith. So I have no idea which one it is. You can pick the one you like
Mhm.
because the text is not very specific. But the gospel goes from faith to faith. And there's truth in all of those. We see the faith of the Old Testament, the gospel reveals the faith of the New Testament. We see the faith of people like Paul, follow me as I follow Christ, into our faith. We see the faith of God's faithfulness, the covenant keeping God, to our faith in response to that. And we can see our growth in faith from young faith to old faith. So take it for what it is and take it for where you want it. Almost done. As it is written. Why is that important?
Because it's been around.
What's that choice?
It's been around.
It's been around. Good. So it speaks to its history. It's the standard, right? Can we change the gospel? All we have to do is look how it's written. Your words don't line up with that. That's not the gospel. Somebody could say, I've got a new gospel. An angel told me. Go, doesn't line up with what's written. The gospel is written. And it guarantees not only the authenticity of it, but the repetition nature of it and the clarity. What was the word you used, Bonnie? The standard of it, right? The canon, as we call it. So Paul emphasizes, this isn't just my idea. This is what was written, and I'm sharing with you. So it's critical that he uses that phrase. Again, each word contains power. All right, 2 more to go. How are we doing? Oh, almost done. But the righteousness of man, and we got into righteousness already, I want to wrap it up, shall live by faith. We've already talked about what faith is, but the word live is great. This is the word Z-A-O, Zeo. I had a friend, they named their granddaughter Zoe. Faith.
Something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
Zaya.
Zaya? It was Z-A-O, yeah. Anyhow, they named it her life. Because faith, although written, although rooted in history, although condemning the unrighteousness, what is the end result of the gospel? Life. The gospel always leads. The gospel which condemns us and shows us, the paradox of the gospel, it shows us how dead we are in order that we might have life. It condemns us and shows us how unrighteous we are, that we can have righteousness. It shows us how needy we are, so that we aren't needy. It shows us how sick we are, so that we can have health. It shows us, all this negative stuff in order to produce life. The end result of the gospel is life. Behold, I have come to give you life and life more abundantly. That's the Zeo. And that's what Paul claims. He says, I want to give you the blessing of life. Salvation results in life so that we can live as God meant us to be lived. And how does God mean us to be lived, Joyce? Each one under their...
Oh, under their own victory.
Yeah,
Shame.
exactly. Life.
Life.
Life lived beautifully, lived abundantly, lived in peace with our neighbors, lived in rest and all these blessings. This is the message. So ironically, the message of the gospel is contained way back there. This call to life, which is shalom, right? Peace. It is the gospel that opens the door to life, abundant life. The true believer made righteous will live by faith all their lives. So Paul later on will say, whether we eat or whether we drink, do it all for the glory of God. It's on the wall of our kitchen. In other words, and glory is light. He says, whether you eat or whether you drink, do it all in the sunlight of God. Isn't that a great image? You're sitting out in the sun. I know I've been depressed lately because it's winter, but the image of sitting on the deck with the picnic table, and you're eating and drinking and the sun shining down on your face, you go, this is living. Camp. Well, you should try camping. It's, it is fantastic. Bugs and wind and that, but this image, or let's say on the deck of your hotel overlooking the beach, we can go with that. But this is the image of the gospel, that the believer, and they don't earn it. You've won the trip to wherever, and you're sitting under the blessings of God, and you receive the gift of God that you have not earned, and then you live. This is the beauty of the gospel, because what's the last part of our thing? BCB, beauty. The gospel is a beauty. Paul wants us to see the beauty of God. Readers. All right, let's wrap this up. The last page is this. I've left it blank, and I want you to think about it. What I want to talk about is implications. We saw before the implications. If you take the O away, you get toxic flammable gas. If you put the wrong torque on, the wheel falls off, right? So each of these is a specific statement that has broad and meaningful and personal implications. So let's take a look at the first one. For I'm not ashamed of the gospel. What is the implication of that statement?
Somebody has been
That
ashamed?
somebody has been ashamed. Yeah, absolutely. The guy with the donkey head. Good. What's another implication of that statement?
There could be risk.
There could be risk. You could be humiliated. Good. What else? Get where we're going with this? Does this make sense? Okay. Yeah, the basic implication initially is that people were ashamed of the gospel, and there's huge risk in proclaiming the gospel. Okay, good. For it is the power. What's the implication of that?
Weakness.
Weakness.
Or what? We were weak.
We're weak,
Yeah.
but it has the power. Good. So the implication of the gospel having power is that we don't. Good. What's the implication of God?
Not humanly possible.
Exactly. Within human effort, it is not possible. All of this comes from God, which should cause us to be grateful. Right? One of the implications of this is thanksgiving. Thank you. All right. For salvation, what's the implication there?
Lost, like
That-
someone lost.
That we are lost. Yeah. It's powerful. It's a humbling implication because it implies that you and I are lost. All right. To everyone, what's the implication there?
No one's exempt.
No one's exempt. And we have an obligation to go and tell everybody, right? This gospel is for everyone. We can't deny anybody the gospel. Race, creed, age, size, color, whatever. There is no exclusion to the gospel. To the Jew first, what's the implication there?
A respect almost?
We have, yeah, it means our relationship with the nation of Israel is different. We respect the history, the heritage. We are tied in many ways. We are the wild olive branch grafted into the olive tree. Yeah, this is a historical faith. Good. Also for the Greeks, what does that mean? Even the people you don't like get to hear the gospel. You know, just because you don't like them doesn't mean, you know, you think, oh, no, they get the gospel too. And that's tough. We live in a fairly peaceful place, but if you're in Israel and you think, okay, the gospel is for the Palestinians, that's a whole different. If you were in Rwanda and you were a Tutsi and you said the gospel is for the Hutu, that would be unthinkable, right? Good. For in it, as I think Bonnie said, there's a power, there's a life there. All right. What's the implication of the righteousness of God? We are unrighteous. Yeah. It's a corrective. The gospel calls us to recognize our unrighteousness. The gospel is hard on us because it makes, we have to come to, we have to repent. We have to say, I am an unrighteous man and I need salvation. There's a humility to the gospel. All right. Is revealed. What's the implication of that? We don't know. Somebody's got to tell me. Whether it was your mom or your guy on the radio or VBS, somebody's got to tell you the gospel, which means that we got to tell somebody the gospel because they're not going to figure it out on their own. Right? Now, it can be revealed through scripture. There are people that pick up a Bible.
Creation, right?
What's that?
Creation.
Yeah, creation reveals an aspect, but not the fullness of it. Right?
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
creation reveals part of who God is, but it doesn't. Yeah. So it has to be revealed from faith to faith, whatever the implications. We'll move through this quickly. As it is written, what does that imply?
Standard.
It is a standard. You can't change the gospel. Even if an angel from heaven comes and declares, you cannot change the gospel. It is fixed, letter to letter. But the righteous man, what's the implication there? We can be righteous. We can become righteous. We can walk that path. We can live on that road. We can keep the tire from being bubbled, so to speak. We can stay within the boundaries of the fences and be happy.
The narrow road.
That we can stay on the narrow road, on the El Camino. We can stay on the great road. Boy, I got a hold of that, didn't I? We can stay on the El Camino, shall live by faith. Two aspects of it. It is not earned, not by works of righteousness, which we have done, but according to his mercy, he saved us by the washing of regeneration and the renewing of the Spirit. We live by faith in the one who loved me and gave himself for me, but we live. People often view Christianity as a downer. Oh, you can't have any fun anymore. When I came to Christ in high school, one of my friends in school said, well, you won't be able to have any fun anymore. I thought, oh yeah, so you think there's no life left in it, you know? And people can look at Christianity as a, if we always say is don't do it, it becomes a don't religion. I think we need to grab a hold of it, emphasize the life aspect of it. That Christianity is a joy, you know? Fruit of the Spirit is
Love,
love, joy, peace, patience. Yeah, Jeff, those are hard, but there is the joy. All right, well, let's all wrap it up. And the whole thing wraps up in verse 18. Why we need the gospel. We'll explore this next week. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and the unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in their unrighteousness. Paul's about to say, and folks, here's why we need it. This section's about to get pretty fun. So, all right, brevity. What was this? The C? Clarity and beauty. I hope you saw that in these simple words. 15 simple words that unpacked express the beauty of the gospel. The gospel, I'll wrap this up, is a Christmas tree you bring home, and it's all wrapped in that stuff. And you think, who would be interested in that? Why would you want that? Then you cut the strings off, and what happens? It opens up, and the smell permeates your house. Word study, Bible study, takes the strings off the text so it can expand and its beautiful fragrance enter our lives. There's my last metaphor. I hope that one works. The gospel is a Christmas tree. All right.
Fragrance.
Oh, good.